Look at the Washington Post. And if you lose the Washington Post as a Democrat, you got some serious problems. This is what they said about the price gouging or the price control legislation. It was really pilloried from both sides of the aisle. Even Jason Furman, I don't know if you saw some of his comments. He said it's not good policy and it could actually do more harm than good. And I can paint you a picture of how that would work and how it's worked in the past, where we've tried to artificially hold prices down. Competition doesn't come in. People don't, like if beef is too high, people don't move the chicken. The competitors don't come in to undercut where the beef prices are. Nothing works when you try to artificially control prices. It's just a supply and demand issue. It's a flawed idea.
So did you have a question here?
Yes. Why would you propose a flawed idea when the real problem,
so let me
if you really want to help the middle class, if you really sincerely want to help people having trouble at the grocery store, it's not price gouging that's the issue. And if you look at it seriously and really want to help them, then let's do something about it together. Fine.
I understand if you want to do a lecture about this, but let's just start with where have you been for the last 30 years as 36 states have price gouging laws, and they have used them effectively. States like Texas and Florida, they've used price gouging laws. Price gouging laws are not price control. Price gouging laws are to say, sometimes markets go off the rails. And when they do, we need some ways to get them back on the rails. We need some curbs on that behavior. So, for example, we watched in the pandemic how prices went up for a whole lot of reasons. They went up partly because we had supply chain kinks. We had problems because of the war in Ukraine that cut supplies of certain commodities. And one of the things that happened as a result of that is there were corporations that said, whoa, now that we have inflation, now that prices are up overall, this is a great opportunity for us to raise prices, not just in passing along costs, but to go way, way, way above that. And how do we know that it was way, way above just passing along costs? Look at what happened to their profit margins. If they'd just been passing along costs, profit margins would have stayed about the same. But for some industries, some companies, profit margins shot up. And do you know where they shot up most often? It was in companies or in industries where there was a lot of concentration, a lot of market power, places where the market is not functioning competitively. So you end up with someone, you remember we all talked about egg prices. You end up with something like this giant egg producer, Cal-Maine. And Cal-Maine raises the price of eggs. Their profit margins increase by 718%. That's not just passing along costs.
Senator,
and that is a time in
that's
any
sophistry. Your example on Kraft. Your example on Kraft is even worse.
You finished first. In any of the states around the country that already have price gouging laws in place.
Can I tell you why those are fallacious and misleading at best? And your Kraft analogy is even. Why can't I tell you? Please let me tell you. Kraft, you say, was 440% profit increase. The example you used, the prior quarter from the year before, they had a charge of $1.3 billion, an accounting change which wiped out profits. Then they earned what they normally. Let me finish now. They earned.
You didn't let me finish. Look at the data. Come on. We have economic study now after economic study.
This is the way it always goes.
When there is more concentration,
40 million eggs were destroyed because of avian flu.
When there is more concentration in an industry, we have seen much greater increases in the profit margins.
Do you attribute to inflation? That's what you think we need to do to solve it?
They're not random. They are not random one-offs. It is part of the problem when you've got companies that are gouging consumers on prices. Consumers need to know they've got somebody on their side.
Senator, listen, we're trying to help. We're trying to actually do.
Where are you in the 37 states that currently have price
just
gouging
quickly
laws?
On that point, Senator Warren,
can you
this is Kelly here. Can I just clarify how this would work?
This is the way you never lose an argument, because no one can ever say anything back to you, Senator.
The state price gouging laws they look at when a state of emergency is declared, and they, for the most part, say if your prices go up 10 or 15% compared to before that state of emergency, you have to pay a fine. So on a national level, how exactly would this work? Would you define the state of emergency? Does it have to be declared on a national level? Are you then talking about a 10 or 15% increase in prices versus prior to that declaration, and then companies have to pay a fine? Okay, fine. Maybe that applies in 1% of the situations. But this legislation, which is still vague, is making it sound like something on the scale of broad price controls would be imposed, broadly speaking. So which of the two systems is it?
So it is not price controls. This is about when the market itself is not functioning. Sometimes markets don't function because there's been a localized emergency, a hurricane, a wildfire, flooding. And so in states that have these price gouging laws, they can come in and say, look, you can do some price increases, but if you're going above a certain level, you have to be able to justify it. You have to show that what you're doing is passing along costs.
Would it be company by company?
Senator, let's go back to cow Maine, because avian flu caused the destruction of 40 million eggs. They have 20% market share. They have 20%, but they don't control the market. It's like OPEC, or it's like oil. When oil prices go up for whatever reason, or they go down, when they go down, the price is set for oil. The reason that cow Maine made that money was because that's what happened to the price. The next quarter, they went down in half. They lost 50% of the profits from the last. They don't set that price. That's and neither do. The Exxon does not set the price of oil. So when Exxon has $80 or $100 a barrel, yes, they make record profits. When there was a pandemic, their profits went to almost zero. Now, it's just the way it is. And to think that the government can decide when prices are too high or too low, the grocery chains have a 2% profit margin. How about Apple with 50% or 40%? How do you decide? This is not the government's place to do these things. It's a fool's errand. And it also is you're using it to divert the real cause of inflation over the last 4 years, which was because you had demand after the pandemic, which obviously, there was a lot because we reopened. And all of a sudden there's supply chain issues, and the demand is juiced by all the stimulus from the IRA and all the other spending that we did.
There have been many causes for inflation. We all understand that. That's why I started my answer in talking about this. But one of the causes of prices going up is that there are companies that have market dominance that have said, oh, this is a moment when everyone is talking about...
Okay, give me another. Name another one. Give me an instance. If you give me an instance.
Finish my argument here?
Okay, go ahead.
That they have gone on earnings calls and said over and over, inflation has been very, very good. Go listen to the earnings calls from the CEO of Chipotle, who says this is an opportunity not to pass along costs. This is an opportunity for us to raise prices beyond passing along costs and increase our profit margins. What the academic studies, I let you finish. What the academic studies show is that industry by industry, when you see more competition, which suggests more pricing power, what we saw is that profit margins went up. And that's the problem we've got, is that states have tools to deal with this locally. But right now, we want to make sure that the FTC has the tools to do it nationally, and that the states that don't have price gouging laws also have access to those same tools.
We have
in the same way that the FTC, for example, has tools to be able to deal with deceptive pricing and deceptive advertising. It should have the ability to deal with price gouging.
Senator,
it's just another tool in the toolbox to say we support
for a state of emergency. Is it for a state of emergency?
Senator,
that the whole point is to
companies learn how to do this?
I let you finish your argument.
Yeah, but I know, but now
did you invite me on here just to lecture to me?
No, I just want to ask you.
The whole point is to get markets that are more competitive. And that's the job of the FTC. That's something state attorneys general work on. We just want to put one more tool in the toolbox when CEOs are going on the phone saying, boy, inflation is great because it gives us a chance to raise our prices.
It's not about diverting the attention away from the real issues that might actually help the middle class that you always talk about helping. For 40 years, companies didn't know how to price gouge until 3.5 years ago when President Biden was elected. Where was the price gouging? We had 40-year highs in inflation. Where was the price? They just learned how to do this 3.5 years ago?
No, the difference is prices were not going up. And as I said, prices started going up for a whole host of reasons. Prices went up because of the pandemic. Prices went up because of supply chain kinks. Prices went up because of the war in Ukraine. Prices were going up. And the difference is when they started going up sharply and people noticed that some companies also noticed and said, you know, we could raise our prices just passing along costs. That's what you do in a competitive market.
This is not
but
widespread,
some companies,
Senator. This is not widespread.
I let you finish. In some markets, what we've seen, in markets where there's less competition, that CEOs said we can do more than pass along costs. And you don't have to take my word for it. Do you listen to earnings calls?
I listen.
These guys have
Senator,
gotten on
the example you use for Kraft. The example you use for Kraft is totally fallacious. It's totally fallacious. You throw the numbers.
And you just want to keep talking. The earnings calls CEOs have gotten out. It's well documented, and they have said we can raise our prices far more than passing along costs, and said to their investors, we have a great future ahead of us because
not
our
a
profit
monopoly.
Margins are going to increase.
Other companies come in. That's the way the system works.
It happened in places where there's more concentration. That's the whole point. It makes your point. When markets are less
has only
competitive,
20%.
There's more price gouging. When markets are more competitive, it's not price. There is no price gouging.
Would it be a state of emergency? The only last thing, Senator Warren, just to give people a sense, are we talking about what period of time for declaring when we're looking is a state of emergency? How do we define the period of time? And then by what percentage? 10, 15%? And then are we talking about fining companies? Is it modeled on the state approach here?
The question you ask is the same question that people want to ask about what is fraud, what is deceptive advertising. The answer is that you look at all of the facts and say, do we see a competitive market where a buyer can understand what it is that they're being offered? And do we have a seller that's meeting that buyer? Are they competing with other sellers? That's what we do in antitrust law all day long.
It's just the vagueness of terms.
There's nothing special here. It's putting one more tool in the toolbox when there's a lot of concentration in an industry, and that starts pushing prices up.
The example for Kraft, if it was done in a straightforward way, Senator, it would just be your argument would be much better. When you say Kraft raised profits 440%, it was because the year before they had taken an accounting charge which brought their profit down to zero. So when they earn a normal profit the next quarter of $800 million, your people put out information it's up 440%. That's disingenuous. As Kelly puts out, competition, the cure for higher prices is when people come in and undercut those prices and supply goes back up. This has been since 1770.
Especially in the restaurant business.
Take yes for an answer. When there is competition, prices will reach the right level.
Then we need antitrust laws and anti-monopoly laws.
Yes, we do. Yes,
we have
do.
them. We already have them. We don't need to layer another one on here that works on what? What are the number of cases you're talking about? 1%?
No. So listen again to the studies. when there is
What's
more
the study?
concentration.
I think I saw the study from Groundworks. It's a liberal think tank, Senator. From Groundworks, that one?
Look, if you don't want to pay attention to the numbers, you can ignore them. You can ignore the calls. But the reality
is,
not
paying attention to the
I
numbers,
let you
Senator.
talk.
Okay.
The reality is the American people know what's happening in pricing. They understand that they are being gouged on prices.
Senator?
And who they blame for that are these giant corporations.
No, they blame
that
the Biden
dominate
administration.
No, you blame the Biden administration
I don't blame,
because you cannot bear the notion that sometimes these competitive markets are in fact not competitive. And when they're not, CEOs have found ways to juice their profits at the expense of the American public. And you may not like that, but the American people understand what's happening, and they want to have people in government who at least have tools in the toolbox to be able to respond when it happens.
So
and that's
prices
what this is all about.
Inflation has already come down without any of this happening. How does that happen? Why do companies stop gouging? Why did Cal-Maine? Why did the prices come down 50% immediately? Why does it happen?
I'm not at all clear that prices have come down.
Oh, so you haven't.
A lot of companies in very concentrated industries have raised their prices and are sitting.
The rate of inflation has come down.
And are sitting on much bigger profit margins than they were sitting on 3 years ago.
In the food industry, they're less than the profit margins are less than they were before the pandemic, Senator. In the food industry.
They are not in industries where there's more concentration. Look, I get it. You want to pretend that markets will always correct themselves.
No, I just want to try to actually do. I want to try to actually conquer inflation, and this won't do it.
I am somebody who believes in competitive markets. That's what I want to see happen. That's what I'm out there fighting for. But competitive markets won't happen on their own. When these companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, one of the consequences is that they start figuring out other ways to juice their profits. They do things like they cut quality, they stop innovating, and they start building up their profit margins. Yeah, we have antitrust laws, and thank goodness for Lena Khan, who's out there starting to enforce them, and to say these giant companies cannot just dominate entire markets and do whatever they want because we don't get the benefits then of markets. This is just one more tool in the toolbox to deal with companies that use their dominance to be able to boost their profit margins. That's all.
Tell me we're out of time, Senator. It's been real and it's been fun. It's been and it's good to go back and forth. We've done this before, and we're going to have to agree to disagree. I think that the way that the United States came out of the pandemic, you want to thank the government. I think the private sector we can thank for the 15 million jobs and everything else. So I think we need to embrace it. There may be a few bad actors, but the whole idea that it's all about these bad corporations is just ill-conceived. But thanks for your time.